territory or Dene or Ojibwe or wherever you happen to be. The land has all our instructions and everything that we need to survive and to live. And that's our mother. So we take care of her. And it's just a whole different way of relating and being on this earth. And it has not been understood or valued. Uh, when people do a land acknowledgement, they don't really know what they're doing. They don't really know what that means to acknowledge that place that you're standing on, the ancestors that were there before you. And I don't know if you have your stone. The stone is not just a stone, it's an ancestor. It's the first beings, we call them first beings of, I mean, whether you accept the Big Bang theory or any other theory of the universe, these stones are considered our grandfather, the first being. And the next ones were the plants. But anyway, but today we ask our ancestors of the earth, to help us. We ask our ancestors behind us to help us because we can't be here without knowing our helpers. Um, our ancestors are right here behind us. All we got to do is ask them, and they've always have our backs, and they always help us. So uh, that's why I asked you to bring an ancestor from the earth to the gathering here, and because we can't do it in a circle the way I usually do. The medicine wheel that we're going to explore a little bit today is like a map for life. It's, um, it's a way of understanding our place in the circle of life. We all have a place, a starting place when we were born on this earth. Everybody's born. That's what makes us equal. We've all been born. We come in a particular time, in a particular place, with particular gifts. And it's our job as humans to understand our purpose, our gifts, and to use them for the people, for the good of the earth, for everything that we need. So we've been given all these things that we need. So that's the frame of mind. It's not me telling you what to do or you telling me what to do or anything like that. It's just being together and making relations with each other in a respectful and responsible relational way. Because the most important thing, don't remember anything else in the Indigenous worldview, all my relations. All my relations. That's the prime directive, that we're related to everything. Trees, the air, the fire, the water, the earth, each other, the family, the nation. We're all related, and our job is to make good relations. That's the prime directive, if you want to call it that, or main value. And it's not money, it's not greed, it's not winning or power. It's relationship that comes before everything. So uh, we're, g- we're going to explore that together in different ways, so that first of all, by thinking about the season that you were born in, spring, summer, fall, or winter, because your place of origin on this earth, you are when you were born in a particular time and place and season. When we think of that, we don't usually think about that. Maybe we read our horoscopes. Um, that's kind of tuning into the larger universe and cosmos that we're part of, because we are star people. We come from the stars. We go back to the stars. We're related, and our the spirit world is just right here too. It's not. They're not far away. Just they're always there to help. So what I would like is for now is for you to think about the season you were born in, because that is the gift that you've been given. That energy, whether it's spring, the air, the new lights, the physical well-being, and coming into your physical body. That's the energy of spring, that energy of new beginning. And there's the energy of the summer, of the fire, of the heart, of emotions, of nurturing and celebration, and going out. And there's the energy of the fall, which is the water and the dreams and the visions and the ceremonies, and getting things done. Like in the winter is a time to reflect and heal and make decisions and plan for the future. So all of these things are part of the energy that we carry, whatever season we were born in. So I would like you to explore that gift that you carry and what you like about it, how it defines who you are. That's your home. That's your home place on the planet. Think about it. That's where you started. That's part of you. Connect to it now for a minute and enjoy that. Think about all the things about that season that are part of you. And we'll take some time to go into little groups and tell our story, because the medicine in this time we have is the stories that we share with each other from our life. Story is medicine. Story is what heals us. Story is what teaches us. Stories are how we learn. And so it's a big part of who we are as Indigenous people. And it's important to share our stories with each other to break down barriers. We can look at those later, but right now we want to just look at ourselves and our ancestors, our origins. So when you go into your group, you introduce yourself by introducing your ancestors, by introducing your homeland, by introducing your season of birth, your place of origin, and how that feels for you. That's where we'll start today. We'll come back and uh, do some more reflecting together, but take that time for you to explore your origin story in a different way. Is
So
that good?
you'll see in the
Yep.
chat box I've shared a link to some slides, and the information that Marjorie is sharing is the primary source that we'll be reflecting on. But in case you missed anything or if you want to come back to anything, the same information is in those slides. So the invitation is to spend at least 5 minutes just reflecting by yourself on your origin story, um, the season of your birth, the land of your birth, and then in your groups you'll be sharing that with the other folks who are there.
And for the gift of the seasons, those slides are up the way. Yeah, that's good. It's part of who we are. That's what it's important to acknowledge our origin that way.
Thank you for having us think about that. There are things we sometimes forget and don't think really deeply about.
Yeah, I think that if we recognize different energies like that, it would help us to work better together too. Because sometimes the people that just want to celebrate all the time, they don't want to get to work, and we get impatient with them. But they remind us that we are feeling human beings, you know, and connect us to each other in a human way.
That's right.
Yeah, where we're not just work doers, we're beings. Yeah.
Looks like we're all back. There's some questions that you had for us to debrief or share back, Marjorie.
Well, I'm open to what people's experience was like. If we've been reflecting here about our gifts of birth and how they impact our day-to-day lives. Our place of origin is part of who we are. We don't have to put it aside. So, any questions, or how was that for people? Any ideas, thoughts? The thing about it is we all were born, and when we think about the circle of life, it means that you have a place in that circle and nobody can take it away from you. You have a gift in that circle and nobody can take that away from you. It's up to you to develop it and use it and take responsibility for it and find your purpose. And that's your starting place, that's your home place, your home fire that you come back to and feel good at. But you also go around that wheel of life every season, every year, spin. We're always spinning in that universe, and it changes. It doesn't stay the same, and we don't stay the same. We grow. Each season brings us to a different place and teaches us a different lesson. And we can learn that from each other by sharing our gifts and our stories, and that builds the community. So we have to make room in that circle so that everybody takes their place. And the law of the circle is self-governance. And that self-governance means that I respect you. I'm responsible for me. I respect you and our relationship together, and that reciprocity that comes in by sharing our stories with each other. That's what builds up people. And so it's the way the way we are in the world based on those natural rhythms is not the way the world works. And so it's very hard to fit in. When you come from a different worldview, it's very hard to accept, the capitalist industrial worldview that's been imposed on everybody, that power relationship and all those inequalities and injustices that come from that competition and from that, all of that, it just does not fit with being in relationship with the earth and the fire and the water and the air. And so that's how we got marginalized in the first place, because those worldviews were not respected, understood, or they didn't even think that we had one. um, so, but it's still there, and it's still the prime directive in our life. No matter how traumatized, how wounded, that prime directive of being in relationship is still the most important value. Comes before everything, before work, before money, before anything. So shaking hands, saying hello, making room, those are all parts of being in good relations, you know. And that means, yeah, that's the, I don't know what, that's the most important prime directive that you could have in your life. And how we got to be us and them, how all the laws that were made against us and are still there in the Indian Act that govern everything, every aspect of life in Indigenous nations here on this land, is not our way. That Indian Act is not our way, but that is what has been imposed on us by the government of Canada, and is still the law of the land in relation to us. So it takes away all those things, takes away all those things. And it's important to understand how that happened, how that happened. And so in this medicine wheel with the stones, we pick up those stones and we talk with those stones, those ancestors, and we ask them to help us understand and to be in a good relation, and to understand where we came from in that history, and how we can heal from that history. That's the thing. So in this next round that we'll do together, we'll be going back to the different groups. It doesn't matter if you end up in a group and it's not your season, because we move around and learn from all directions, every year of life. So if you were born in spring, you have to balance with the fall. You have to balance with the winter. You have to balance with the summer. You have to know those energies as well, so that you can become a whole human being. Because each one has a different aspect that can help us. So the medicine wheel, these stones that you will look at, you look at spring, there's a message about history in that stone, and there's a message, a question about your story and how you connect to that history, how it impacts you. So if you pick up a piece and you read that message, you read that question, and you hold your stone and you talk for it, you let it speak through you. Whatever you know, whatever you have to share about that piece of information, of history that you've received, that's what you're responsible for today, just that one piece. And you try to get inside that piece a little deeper by going through your story, reflecting on what you know. It's like, if you think about, let's think for one other, like first contact. You know, we talk before the Europeans here. You know, that's called, and then there's first contact. And then think about in your own life, what is your first contact with Indigenous people here on this land? Your first contact. What was it? If you've had any at all contact with Indigenous people or with ideas about Indigenous people, what's your first contact? What's your first contact with Indigenous people here? At school? Was it good? Was it on misinformation? Think about that for a moment. This contact. No? What did it teach you?
So we're going to go back into the groups, and you'll see that from slides 8 to 17, they're divided into different seasons. So in your group, you'll pick a season, and then each person in your group will pick one of the prompts to read through, to reflect on, and then to answer that question and share back with the rest of the group. And again, once you're in that group, you'll decide on what season you want to reflect on. So that could be, you know, maybe 4 people in your group happen to be born in summer, then maybe summer feels like a good season for you to reflect on. But as Marjorie said, we're all going through all of the seasons at all times of the year. So it's something for us to think through anyway.
Just talk for one of those. You don't have to go through all of them. This isn't like an assignment where we have to get through everything. It's important that you connect with one piece of history and with your story for that piece, and with each other, you know, in that sharing. Yeah. One of the things that's part of our way of doing things is intergenerational. We don't go by these categories, you know, youth is like 15 to 30 or whatever, or baby, you know, children, you know, like all the gatherings are always intergenerational, unless, you know, the funding bodies decide that it's only for this age group. And what happens after you're 18, you know, like you don't just change one because you had a birthday. And your relationships don't change because you had a birthday. Like, so that's always one thing to try to break down is those rules that they impose, even in terms of age and categories that we're connected with, and we can learn from any age or any time, you know, anybody. So when you have a camp or a gathering or an event, it's always good to have the buffer zone, like between the elders and the youth, or the I mean, the people that were like 10 years older than me when I was growing up, like my aunties or my cousins, like were like buffer zone between my parents and my grandparents, and they were the ones that taught me lots of things that they wouldn't tell me, right? So there's a need for those aunties or uncles, like there's a need to have those bridges between generations, because you can learn differently without, you can't always learn, you know, from your mother, but your auntie could teach you the same thing, and my mother could teach my cousin better than she could teach me, like, because we don't have the things that get in the way sometimes. Because of roles and responsibilities. So it's always good to have that mix so that you have more than one way, and that you don't all think the same because you're thrown into this group, you know? We don't know how to navigate it necessarily. So hello everybody, I guess we're all back. You having a good time? sharing stories, learning about history and about each other and your relationship to this place and time. Open to hearing insights, questions, reflections.
Lorelai and Katie are sharing in the chat box. Do you mind sharing a little bit with the group?
Sure, I can go. I'm just finding it just great, Marjorie, how, it all, like you said, it comes down to relations and just really getting to know people and sharing stories with people. And you become connected as humans. Yeah. And you realize how much you do have in common and how much there is to learn. So I really appreciate this time.
Oh, good, thank you. We are human beings, not human doings.
Yeah, I would just add on to that as well. In the groups that we've been in, just the opportunity to see how our own experience and relationships growing up, like answering those questions. I was in a group with Summers, so we looked at questions 7 through 12, and we each took one, and just the personal experience of our background and how we came to understand that question and to think about it in the way that you have it written in the PowerPoint was so powerful for us to really understand it in a new way and to think about putting ourselves in those situations. The questions were so powerful to bringing us to the place like the Métis Rebellion. I have visited some of those sites, but to actually about what would you fight for, what would you die for, and to put yourself in that, it just created so much more understanding for me personally. And then to hear the stories in the group, I think it's because of the personal connections that we have that we can come to better understanding. So it was a very cool exercise. And thank you for all the very good questions and the summaries that just focus us on the issues and the intent of some of those acts. It was very, very enlightening. Thank you.
Okay. You don't learn those things in school. Are there any other groups that have reflections to share?
Our group discussed the spring questions, and I think a lot of our discussion raised more questions. So it was great. The sharing was great, but we also had a number of questions. Like one of the topics we covered was the 2-row Wampum Belt Treaty, which I hear a lot about because I live in Hamilton, Ontario. It's in our land acknowledgement. Familiar with what it is, but I don't know if it was signed and like with what intention it was signed. Was it just signed and then discounted, or signed and then not understood, or I don't know that. I don't know that part of the story. So that's one of the questions that we raised.
So one of the things about picking up that stone or that question or that like the 2-row wampum, for example, now that you have it, it's in your hands, and then it becomes like your responsibility to go and find out, and to make those connections for yourself and to make those relations for yourself. It's ongoing. It's not just an exercise or a one-shot deal. It's like these ancestors are working on you already. They're already asking you to do that work and to carry it forward in your realm of being. So those peace and friendship treaties that were signed at that time that recognized, basically they recognized two different ways that no longer exist, right? That's been, they tried to wipe it out. But in the beginning, those original peace and friendship treaties, we were each in our own canoes navigating the river. Nobody was taking over, but then it changed. So how do we restore that broken treaty relationship, kinship that originally intended by those Wampum treaties, for example?
Adriana has a hand up.
Mm.
Sorry, that was my mistake. My apologies.
Okay, Adriana Pena, are you from Trinidad?
I'm not. I'm originally from Colombia,
Colombia?
and in our group, actually, I had an opportunity to have a very interesting discussion about my own identity, whether it was given and chosen, and the fact that I have a background of Spanish, Spanish blood, and also Indigenous and Black. So I'm really appreciative of having the chance of having that conversation with my group. Yes.
Oh, great. I only asked because I have relatives that are Peñas, they're from Trinidad, so I thought, well, maybe we're connected that way. Anyway, that mix of Black, Indigenous, Spanish, all these different peoples that we carry within ourselves, but also like right now in this group, I mean, we're from probably the whole world in this room right now. And how that whole world came here to this Turtle Island, to this land, and what do we have to offer each other? I mean, we don't know each other. We don't connect with each other that in a way that we recognize the gifts that people carry and from their own cultural roots and origins. And one of my elders told me a long time ago, the reason we have so much trouble here right now is because the ones that came here left their ancestors over there. They disconnected from their homelands, but they're also disconnected from their ancestors. They don't feast them. They don't talk to them. They don't, they're over there. There's that disconnect, and that history, and even why they came here, and all of those things, like that's not talked about. That's not shared, and so the relationship can't possibly be built if you don't have your ancestors right here behind and be in contact with them through ceremony or through whatever means you have in your way, then there's a big piece missing because the past and the future are here now. And if we left the past over there because it's hard to talk about, or whatever reason we left it, cut it off, then we can't be whole in our relations with each other. Because it's all of these pieces are part of us, and that blood memory, that ancestral DNA that we carry, it's part of us. So we have to have a way to connect with each other from that place as well. It's about our spirits being nourished, and our ancestors are the ones that do that. And that connection is really important.
Thanks, everyone. I think it feels like a good time just to take a little bit of a break. So maybe we can be back here in 10 minutes. So that would be at 1:15. See you back then. Take care.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone, after the break. The rest of the time that we have together, we thought that we might do a couple of things. The one is answer questions that might have been coming up for you. And the other is thinking through how this might apply to the work that you do. I think that this experience has been different, deliberately very different from the previous two workshops that we've done, because those are workshops in a very like traditional, almost like colonial sense of the word, right? We had slides, we had presenters, whereas this was hopefully to give you a taste of what it's like to actually inhabit space and be in relationship in a different way. And it raises a few questions about like how uncomfortable might this have been for you? Did you feel like this is not a space where you are used to being in ways that you're used to being? And then one, to apply that to Indigenous people who had to kind of force themselves into this different way of being that's not comfortable for them. And also for a lot of newcomers and migrants who arrive here, who are trying to make sense of this new land and trying to put themselves into a way of being that might not be comfortable for them. And what within our systems and structures as settlement services or settlement agency providers or the coordinators of these settlement agencies, are we trying to get people to fit into something that's uncomfortable for them, or are we helping to expand the broader society to make more spaces more comfortable for more people?
Mm.
So perhaps you can start with that, Marjorie, if you've got some thoughts to share, and then if folks have questions to ask from there.
Well, like I've said before, the break, that self-governance is the principle of the circle. That's the hardest thing to do, to govern yourself in relation to others and to the land and to the water and to everything around us. So what is our meeting ground, to create equality and to make room for difference in this world that we're in now? Like acknowledging difference, making room for it, and not to resist or fear, because I find fear and judgment are barriers to relationship. So that force of attraction, that respect and recognition and acknowledgement and solidarity comes by sharing our story. And the anger and the shame and the blame, those are forces of fear and judgment that don't really help our relations. So given the experience that, the small little bit that we've had today from entering into another worldview, how can that translate into what you can do in your sphere of being to make things better for Indigenous people and for our relationships in general as humans? This medicine wheel, just to the larger picture here, in 2000, I first created this as a way to help people understand the impact of the Indian Act on our lives, because most people have not looked at it or seen it or understand it. Even Indigenous people, we don't, there's so many laws in there, and how do people get that understanding? And it could take years to go through this whole there's 7 rounds there's 44 stones, there's 7 rounds. And today I just shared with you the 24 stones on the history round, and that if we went through that, even just that outside circle of 24 stones for the history, that's just that could take a long time, because if you like uncover something that you don't know and you have to go and find out, you take that responsibility and you implement it. That's the purpose. And then you look at the impact on body, mind, heart, and spirit on that place of origin, and how that destroyed those things. And then you look at how we can rebuild uh, and restore that circle, and people take their place in it again. That's the goal of that medicine wheel. That intention was to restore our place in the circle and equal, and that everybody has a place. You were born and you have a place, and you have gifts to bring, and nobody else can take that place or occupy that place but you. And nobody else can be you. So how can I use my gifts, for in the larger sphere of things, to make it better? And I know we've only had a little bit to look at the different historical realities and our relationship to it. So I'm open to how you translate that into moment for yourself, and what we would need to make it different. I guess that's the question. Or if you have any stories you want to share or insights from your group conversations, that would be welcome, so that we have a fuller picture from everybody about what's happening today. Is it too much? Well, I'm going to give. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I guess for me, regardless of who I'm working with in the community right now, I feel like I have to temper everything that they might bring up with what's also occurring right now. So, for example, I have to make reference to the Discover Canada guide in some of my work. And so I cover that, but I also cover currently what's happening in different communities in terms of populations and needs and lack of amenities, and to just bring the reality of today's existence so people can think about what communities need. And also to realize that they might not have been so aware of certain communities and the challenges that a lot of Indigenous people are still facing on every level. Politically, with the land, with water, living conditions, a curriculum in the schools. So it's a lot to bring forward. But so then, Marjorie, what could we do for the most positive representation of being here today with you? Could we bring forward, like paying it forward? You've shared, we've heard, or I've heard, I can't speak for everyone else. So from what I've heard, what would you wish of me to go forward with?
Well, I think it would. I'm hoping that it would invite people to make relations with the Indigenous people.
Mm.
The conversations wouldn't be about them, but with them. Because that's the only way that things will change. We change our understandings of each other and our knowledge of each other through sharing our stories like we're doing now. And it has to be in a, culturally safe space. I think it also hopefully opens the door to really looking at the real history, not just what you're told in these government agendas. So, like, I would ask people, what Aboriginal communities are in your region or where you grew up, and what's your relationship, and how can that be changed, for example? Or how many Indigenous artists or musicians or films or writers do you know? Like, to get a better sense of the worldview, you go to the storytellers, the artists, and get their understandings and or historical figures or heroes that are in the Indigenous community. I mean, how many do you know? Um, how many times do you watch APTN? I mean, if you watch the APTN news, you won't find what you see on GTV or Global or CBC. You won't find any of our news on there. But when you watch APTN, you get a different picture of the world.
Well, I do watch, or not watch, I listen to Reclaimed and Unreserved
Right.
on CBC
Yeah.
to listen to a lot of different artists and their worldviews. So,
Yeah, that's good. That's what people need, more exposure.
yes.
And now with COVID, we can't participate in round dances or protests or vigils or ceremonies. Like those are like the only way to know is to be in the circle. Like the only way to know, really know who we are and what we're about is to be in our gatherings, in our events, in our ways, so that it can experience the difference. You can't just talk about it because it doesn't. You have to experience it. That's why, even though it's limited on Zoom, I try to experience that by sharing stories. Is what we're doing here, and I would encourage people to do as well. You could do the medicine wheel. I mean, it can be sent to you, the whole thing, and you could take it and use it in your groups and activities if you wanted to. It's for everybody. It's been all over, and it's been adapted. So, like, you can just take whatever part resonates with you. That's your starting place, and over time, you'll find your way through different things. But it's there as a resource for you to use. It can be sent to you after if you want it. All the instructions.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I asked Jesse to reopen the breakout rooms, and for 10 minutes, just for folks to share what has been happening in terms of like newcomer and Indigenous relations, where they are. So if you've got examples to share, if you've got programs that are happening, just to hear and learn from one another. So we'll just be in those rooms for 10 minutes.
That's good.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Before we wrap up, we thought it would be nice to just hear from a couple of folks, and also for folks that we haven't heard from before. So if you've spoken, or if you know that you're normally someone who speaks more often in these spaces, and to allow other voices who perhaps aren't as comfortable speaking or don't get as many opportunities to speak. And it would be great just to hear a couple of examples to know what's happening around the country. Maybe we can just go coast to coast, and if there's someone from the West Coast who wants to share a little bit about what's happening here, someone from interior-ish, and then someone from the East Coast. Any volunteers from the East?
Kimo here from Lloydminster. I just shared with my group about the relationship between Indigenous and immigrants, and what I have been doing to probably bridge that. Before I started what I was doing, there is a misconception sometimes from Indigenous that immigrants, government is spending a lot on them and then ignoring some of them. So to build that relationship, I had a Connecting Us All Diversity and Inclusion Forum that I started 2 years ago. So we come together and talk. We have a panel of immigrants talking about their challenges and successes and achievements. And we have Indigenous people as well sharing that. And then we do have blanket exercise at the end of all those events to understand the history. So the idea was to introduce immigrants early in their settlement and integration process about Indigenous history through the blanket exercise, but also for Indigenous people to understand some of the challenges and struggles that immigrants have also gone through to get to this place. So that has been wonderful and successful. And then after the first year of the Connecting Us All, we did a diversity calendar wherein we have Indigenous photos in there, we have immigrant photos in the calendar, and which was viewed as by both immigrants and Indigenous as a very good thing that, oh, I have you in my living room, oh, I have you in my house. So in that way, when they meet in public places, did you see that calendar? I love that calendar. You see that picture? So they talked about it. So that is one way that I have done that in Lloydminster.
No, it's great.
Thanks. Maybe we have time for one more person. Anyone volunteering to share?
Maybe not from a personal experience or our LEAP experience, but our general discussion really, we centered around most of our folks at the table were from sort of municipal LEAPs. And it seems like there's a common theme that we tend to attach our LEAP work to some structures that are already existing within the municipal structures, such as diversity and inclusion work, such as the provincially mandated sort of work on concept and work planning. So there's some bit of intersectionality there with what other initiatives that are happening within municipalities that LEAP is at table and informing newcomer issues, but also getting a two-way process on understanding some of the challenges Indigenous communities face. Yep.
Thanks. And anyone else? Maybe one more person? And feel free to share in the chat as
well. If I can just jump in, I just wanted to comment that with us at the Canadian Centre for Victims of Torture, we're currently doing a land-based research. And this is facilitated by an elder, Elder Norma Jacobs of Six Nations. And this is in relation for the refugee population, survivors of war and torture, to learn about Indigenous history and just changing the whole perspective in terms of how would settlement look like if we started from the framework of Indigenous narratives. This is a history that usually many newcomers do not learn about, but it is a journey that the center has started, and it involves staff members, volunteers, and the service users as well. And the way I see it is that in order for us to do this work, it's very important that the work, it's very personal. You have to also do a lot of self-reflection. It's not really doing the work, but you have to be in it. You have to be, that relationship building requires a self-reflection as well. So I have personally, in order for me to do this work and to work with Indigenous communities, personally, I had to reflect on my own biases and colonial views in order to change the system. So it's very personal.
Thank you very much, Bobby. Marjorie, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Any what?
Final thoughts that you wanted to share?
Oh, I just want everybody to honor their gifts of their birth and origins, and to spend some time maybe see people through that lens for a while, and just change the way that we see each other and our children, our families, our relations. Also, that each direction contains so much more, like each season have so much to teach us, so that whatever season we're in, like right now, this -40 in Saskatchewan, what's it teaching me? What does it have to offer me today? Beautiful, sunny, and everything else, but I can't stay out there more than 3 minutes before I freeze my face off. What does that mean? So just being in the natural world, being aware of what's going on around you, seeing people as they are, and finding ways to share stories is a good place to start. And whenever there's anything going on that you can connect to in the community, do so, and don't let the fear or the judgment get in the way, because we don't know until we know. We won't know without being there. There's a lot of struggles and around the land and the water and the pipelines and all those things that are going on, and all across the land, wherever you are, there's a struggle going on, whether it's for food sovereignty. Like, just imagine the one store in town that burns down and you can't get food. Like, that's what's happening in Nunavut right now, one of the communities. And there's so many things going on every day, and so many people need that human connection. So even if it's just smiling on somebody when you go in the store or pass by them, makes a big difference. That humanity to be recognized. The most important thing.
Thank you so much, Marjorie. Thank you for spending time with us today. There's some questions in the chat about how do we get more participation from Indigenous community in our immigrant programs. And I think really what Mbalu said, like, this is a personal journey, and what Marjorie's been sharing with us, it's a relational journey. We need to have those relationships. We need to foster those relationships between us and individuals and one-to-one before we can start engaging broader community. So I hope that today has given you a taste of what that might look like, to take the time to invest in those relationships with one another, in your teams, across teams, with different communities. Because if we don't have those relationships with one another, we can't understand one another's worldviews, and then we won't be able to take our seat in the circle. Thank you again so much for participating and for showing up today. I'll be sharing back some of the learnings from the 3 sessions that I've been involved with, so you can look out for that. But if there's anything else that's coming up, I'll just encourage you to keep learning within these circles that you formed today. I think there's a lot that's happening across the country, but it seems like each community is doing their own thing, and it would be good to create more spaces where that learning can be shared. Thank you so much to Jesse and the team as well for making these happen. And I think that's it from me. Okay.
Thank you, Aslan, and thank you, Marjorie. I just wanted to again echo that thanks to both of you and to everyone for attending today. If you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me, and please be on the lookout for future sessions in the series. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your week.